All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. We want to respect everybody's time. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Laurel Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Marketing for Sure Impact. Today is the first session in our four-part webinar series, Level Up Your Team's Impact. Today, you will be learning specifically how to communicate to your executive leadership team about the ways impact measurement positively impacts the organization. Our speaker today is Sherry Chaney Jones, founder and president of Sure Impact. Sherry is a social change entrepreneur, an expert in social impact measurement, and a thought leader in applied organizational research. Sherry is passionate about women's equity and the advancement of girls. She is a past Columbus chapter president of the National Association of Women Business Owners and a commissioner for the Columbus Women's Commission for the Mayor's Office. Just a quick note before we get started, you can submit as many questions as you would like in chat. We do have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And with that, I will go ahead and turn the time over to Sherry.
Thank you, Laurel. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, wherever you're logging in from. I'm honored and grateful to be with you all today, talking about a topic that is extremely near and dear to my heart, but it's also one that we've been hearing from a lot of our Sure Impact followers and audiences related to, hey, impact measurement. It sounds like something we should be doing. It's something we're excited about in our organization, but I'm not quite sure if we are leveraging it to the greatest extent possible, or maybe it requires a culture shift because you have a culture that's been living in outputs or not outputs, compliance and, just counting things, collecting outputs, but also wanting to transfer to a culture of outcomes and impact. And we recognize that it does take a culture shift. It does take thinking about the data that you have and how are you reporting it and how are you using it and how you are analyzing it in a slightly different way. And so we wanted to take some time today to have a conversation with you, answer any questions you have, as well as kind of lay the case, if you will, for impact measurement, how you can leverage impact measurement at executive team level, or if you are somewhere else in the organization but want your executive team to understand the value that impact measurement could be for them, giving you some talking points. Share this deck with them, share this video with them after the call to explain why it would be important for your organization to grow and scale. So we're going to start with, just so I get a sense of where everyone is in the call today, a quick poll. So we'd like you to answer the question, how would you describe your organization's current impact measurement process? And if Laurel can launch that poll, hopefully you'll see that share up on your screen. All right. So again, go ahead, and what are the options again, Laurel? Because I can't see the poll.
So the answers are, we don't have one. It's manual. It's a combination of manual and using technology, and it's fully automated.
All right. I'll give you a minute to think about your current organization and how you are measuring impact, and if you are even having an impact measurement culture or process.
All right. Well, I think we got everyone's answers in. So 30% said we don't have one. 9% said it's manual. 61% said it's a combination of manual and using technology, and 0% said it's fully automated.
Okay. Well, then we can talk a lot about that. And Marcy asked a question if today we'll talk about sharing data, impact data with your board and with your donors. And we'll touch on that, like the importance of having impact measurement so that you can share it with your board and donors. And we'll have a follow-up. This is a 4-part series. So we'll have one in the future that will be focused on talking to the board about the importance of impact measurement and why it's important to them, as well as we'll have one coming up related to how does development staff and marketing staff use impact measurement, and how they would use it and be consumers of it. So we'll touch on it today from an executive level, but we'll also have sessions specifically for board members as well as for development and marketing folks as well. All right, so let's start with why this conversation is so important. I'll take you back in the Wayback Machine. About 10 years ago, I was very curious about how nonprofits and government entities were using data. What data did they have, and what results were they experiencing because of that? And what prompted me to even want to study this whole topic was that I was working at the time at the Department of Aging. I was the director of the Performance Center, and my role at the time was to evaluate all of the impact of all of the grants that we gave, all of the programming that the state of Ohio and the Department of Aging had done, and communicating that to legislatures, to federal grants, to really any of our stakeholders, the media, to talk about the importance of the programs and services that the Ohio Department of Aging offered. And at that time, I was able to help our agency prove how they save the state of Ohio $250 million a year in Medicaid. And because we were able to prove how we saved the state $250 million a year in Medicaid by keeping seniors happy, healthy in their own homes, we were able to recoup all of our budget cuts that were happening because of the Great Recession, where we saw our sister agencies significantly have budget cuts. And so that then inspired me to say, what was it about the Department of Aging that allowed them to have this information, to create a culture of impact data? And were we unique or were we different? And so this is what we found. And I wrote about the results in impact and excellence. But with a national study of nonprofits, we identified 3 types of nonprofit organizations. The first were impact and outcome. They had impact and outcomes data, and they were using that data to drive their decisions. So that's the key. They didn't just have the data, they were using it every day to drive decisions. Then we had our compliance organizations. Those are organizations that were collecting some sort of output data, maybe who they served, the descriptions of who they served, the number of people, but they weren't really using it, or if they were using it, they were just reporting it back to funders, but there wasn't a strategic process and plan to use that data to drive decisions to move their mission forward. And then the third group did not have any data to really speak of, and it didn't drive their decisions. And so how you would read this chart, if you're looking at the screen, is that you can see our impact and outcome nonprofits, those who are using data to drive decisions, were significantly more likely to do all of the things you and your board, I know, are looking to do. They had greater efficiencies. They were able to do more with less. They were able to deliver greater impact into the community. They also, so how you'd interpret that is 87% of our impact and outcome nonprofits were able to realize increased efficiencies versus only 37% of our outputs data versus 12% of our no data. And so that pattern repeated with external relationships, better relationships with funders, peers, partner agencies, the press, as well as internal relationships. They had better collaboration, cooperation, communication, and increased revenue. So this is the basis for why outcomes and impact measurement is so important for all nonprofits, is that it is the hidden secret sauce. So if you are not yet fully kind of having access to and utilizing impact and outcomes data to drive your decisions, you are leaving money on the table. So at the very beginning, why is it so important that executive teams value and put forth and invest in their impact and outcomes data gathering, data use, and processing? Is because it is the fuel that drives your nonprofit to reach the goals that you want. Additionally, we are seeing more and more data come out of Penelope Burke and her research on donors and funders, and looking at what are funders wanting to give to and what will make them give to additional gifts. And we've seen this shift where 15 years ago or so, maybe it was just the government that was asking for outputs and outcomes. Now we're seeing corporate foundations requiring it. And even now individual donors are talking about the importance of evidence of outcomes. And so she posed this question about someone makes a gift and they get a thank you. So kind of table stakes, right? Of course, yes, we're going to make a gift. We're going to thank someone for the gift. We're going to tell them about, where they're going to use our resources, our money. Then they follow up to that donor with evidence-based update on basically, hey, this is what you invested. These are the outcomes you bought. This is the impact you provided. And then after that, they're asked to give again. What would you do? And so as you can see by her research, you'll see that 67% would say, yes, I would renew the next time I was asked. 52% said they would not only renew, but they would make a larger gift. And 67% said they would continue supporting a donor-centric nonprofit for indefinitely. So that will just entrench your donors to you. So again, why this is so important is because, yes, I could spend all day talking about why you are in the business to create change and to create impact. But when you can communicate to your funders, whether they're corporate, foundations, or individual givers, the impact, evidence-based impact on how their dollars made a difference, it increases their likelihood to give to your organization again. But I have some bad news. This is my only bad news slide in the whole entire presentation, is that if executive teams want impact data, if they want to be able to share with their funders and their donors an evidence-based impact story, they have to prioritize a data-driven culture. Impact-centric organizations is a team sport. It is a team sport. It takes everyone in the organization. And that's why this 4-part series will talk about executive teams, boards, program teams, development teams, like why it's important for each of these teams to understand the role that impact measurement plays and how to create a data-driven culture and how it is the future. It is the future of the nonprofit sector if you want to stay relevant and you want to raise money. So we've established that in our current reality, our current day and age, having outcomes and impact data related to your programs and services is going to be required for success, for relevancy, for increased funding. As more and more nonprofits, just think about this, as more and more nonprofits start to tell evidence-based stories to their donors and their funders, guess what? Donors and funders are going to start asking all the other organizations to tell them their impact. And we're already seeing this happen across the country. So if you are not investing in impact and outcomes processes, then you will be left behind. And I sometimes say things and I'm like, man, I sound a little alarmist, but that's just the reality of where we are today in a shifting culture. So we have 3 options as executive leaders, or your executive team has 3 options. The first is you can stay with the status quo. The second is you can take it through a manual approach. And the third is we're calling the sure impact approach, leverage technology approach. So we have these 3 options, and they're your choice, but let's talk about, I know as an executive leader, anytime I'm trying to make a decision about what's right for my organization, where should I move, what should I prioritize, what should I invest in, I want to have a pros and cons. Again, I'm very data driven. I want to understand the pros and cons of my decisions. And so we're outlining kind of the 3 options as a nonprofit that you have, and what are the pros and cons of each of those options. So the first option is, if you have not yet prioritized collecting, analyzing, and using outcomes and impact data, that's what we're determining as maintaining the status quo. So some of you may find yourself in that boat. And so the pros are the staff don't have to do anything else. There's no additional work. They can keep doing what they're doing. And you don't have to prioritize any funding for outcomes and impact measurement in your budget. So those are the benefits of taking this approach. However, the cons are, and I think they're significant, is that you will potentially lose out on hundreds to millions of lost revenue. You will miss out on new future funding. You will miss out on renewals. You will miss out on increased ongoing giving. You just will be missing out on increased revenues. And then why I am so passionate about this is, yes, I know it helps us drive our revenues, but you are in the business of social change. It is your mission to change people's lives and change circumstances. And so when you do not have insights into your outcomes and your impact, then you could potentially be creating ineffective programs, and you could be doing harm in the process. And I have been part of organizations, and luckily they had committed to evaluating their programs, to tracking outcomes. And so when they learned that maybe they weren't as effective at creating impact as they desired, they could use that data to pivot to increase their effectiveness. But it wasn't until they had committed to data collection that they could make those improvements and they could change and reiterate and refine. So that's our status quo. You can go back to your teams, and if they say, yeah, you know what, I don't think that that's for us now, or we're going to wait into the future to worry about outcomes and impact tracking, that's something that you can do. It's definitely a choice. However, just know what are the pros and cons of making that choice. All right. The second is the manual approach, which it seems like a lot of you fall into this manual approach. And so the manual approach is that you can use free tools like Excel or Google Sheets. You can create data forms and fields and have people populate spreadsheets and data sheets. Maybe if you have enough staff on your team, or you have an external consultant, or if you have someone dedicated where they can put together all of these free Excel tools or spreadsheets, you can cobble together in a way that tells a compelling impact story that will allow you to increase your funding so you can meet those obligations for what the funders are asking for. And so you can tell an impact statement, and you can tell your funders that you're doing that. So this is definitely better than status quo, because you are definitely having some data about your outcomes and you're using it to tell your story. But the cons of this approach are that you don't have real-time insights into what's working. So you have to wait potentially till the end of a quarter or end of a year to figure out, were you on track, or if you were off track. You have to wait until some human can come and crunch all the numbers and give you a report. And then if you really want to look at cross compare different programs or different how services relate to programs and other things like that, you could potentially be not as effective as you want. You might not be able to pivot when you want. So it really could hinder or stop the progress and the impact your organization is having. We also find that there are a lot of fits, stops, and starts with organizations who are using the manual approach, because they're often dependent on one individual skill or knowledge. So we hear about, oh yeah, I've got Joe. Joe's our data person. And then Joe gets a great job to go move across the country to Hawaii with his spouse. And so Joe is no longer with your organization. And now no one knows how to do what Joe did. And so it's creating a lot of complicated situations. And now you're back to square one, rebuilding the manual approach. So very dependent on one's skill or knowledge. And then thirdly, there is a cost to this. Oftentimes, nonprofits don't realize the cost that they're spending to the manual approach, but it is costing you in staff's time and staff's resources, and probably a lot of inefficient work. And that busy activity is preventing them from doing higher level order stuff. So let's talk about the Sure Impact approach, or the leveraging technology, so you have this information at your fingertips. Well, the pros is you'll have the data at your fingertips to share with any funder at any time. Anytime an opportunity arises, you'll be able to share with them your impact and outcome stories, which will increase funding. We're hearing from some of the Sure Impact users that they've been doubling, sometimes even seeing 42, 50%, 100% funding increases, because they have outcomes and impact data they can share in real time. It also will allow you to have those real-time insights to ensure you're meeting your strategic goals, to ensure that you're hitting those targets and you're achieving your mission. and you can share that information with your board. Also, the staff time is spent on programming and revenue generating activities. And that's extremely important, especially for your development team, your fundraising team, your programming team. And you're also going to reduce costs and increase efficiency because you have your data all in one place, structured in a way that makes sense and it drives decisions. Now, the con is you will have to probably spend some money for impact measurement software in order to have this data at your fingertips. So why is it that what we believe, and trust me, I used to do the manual process. I spent 20 years of my career helping nonprofits put all those spreadsheets together and try to make sense of the data. And I, through that process, I started to say there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way than for nonprofits to be reliant on, me or my staff or my team or that person that has the data. They have to have a way where at any given time they can log in and see how well they're doing, what they've been working on, are their goals being met? And so technology is really the only solution for us in the 2023 going into 24, when funders are expecting us to have this information. Trust me, your board members who sit on corporate foundations, they have access and insight into their businesses, critical KPIs at their fingertips. They have that information at their fingertips. And so they probably don't even realize that you don't have that information at your fingertips until you educate them and say, hey, you know what? Technology didn't exist. Now technology exists. It's time for us to move into this new generation and leverage technology so that we can get to these outcomes. So if you find yourself saying, you know what, you're right, Sherry, we are not ready to tell our impact and outcome story. We don't have real insight into how we're changing lives and changing circumstances. We don't have real-time insights into who we're serving. Are we creating equitable outcomes? Then we need to kind of build a case, if you will, internally within our organization, or you can use these same points that we're talking about and use them to go out and share this with donors and funders as well that you're looking to help you create an outcomes and impact program. So first, you need to demonstrate to your executive team that there is a problem. They might not even know that there's a problem because maybe they haven't realized, they're super busy as well. They've got a lot of things going on. Maybe they don't know the trends of how funding decisions are made significantly. Maybe they don't understand how the data is even coming up to them and how complicated or how confusing it is to get it. So we need to first by saying, okay, what is impact measurement? And are you doing today? And how are you getting there? Are you at 100%? Can you talk about what you do, how well you do it, and how people are better off? And equally look at equitable outcomes and if different measures impact different measures or different services impact different services. And if you don't have access to that, and if it is very intensive, start to talk about why this is a problem for you. What are the known internal problems to the process, to getting that information, to becoming more data driven? So first you have to kind of really outline what's going on in your organization. So maybe you currently have to go to 10 places to get all of your data. We've talked to some users who we've learned went from 30 different spreadsheets down to one system to make sense of what's going on in their organization. Or maybe you haven't been able to quickly apply for grants because when you got the grant, it required a certain level of impact, past performance or impact data, and it was just going to be too time consuming for your program teams to go and crunch those numbers for you to go and apply. And so just kind of identify what are all of the problems within your organization because of your lack of impact and outcomes data. I want to give you a case study, a story of Center of Hope Executive Director, Dr. Tracy Perryman, and she found herself several years ago dealing with many of these pain points as well. She's the CEO of the organization, the founder, and before Sure Impact, she had to go to 10 different places to get the data she needed. So if she wanted to go have a presentation with a funder, write for a grant, communicate to donors about what they were doing, she had to first go figure out, where is that data? Where do I find it? Can I make sense of it? She wasn't able to help her staff by looking at one individual's client's progress over time, to be able to go in and say, okay, can I help you better serve this particular client? They provide after school programming and workforce development for adults, but she couldn't go in and just see, okay, are we moving the needle for this one child, let alone look at the aggregate information. As the CEO, she didn't know where her priorities should be, because she didn't have a holistic view of everything that was going on in the organization and what was working and what was not working and where she may need to intervene or have her staff, process improve. And she also was, and this was surprising when we interviewed her about what her current state was, but she spent a lot of time double checking data to ensure it was accurate. So she had to kind of track down her data people, because she didn't have insight into the source of that information. And so like kind of validating and double checking and quality assurance, which I should tell you, the CEO should not be involved in quality assurance if you can avoid it. And she had no way to share the data with her funders in a timely manner. She was always dependent on somebody else giving her access to that information. So what is the cost of not doing something? Because again, we're seeing a lot of this. People are saying, yeah, we get that impact measurement is important. We understand that the funders are asking for it and it's something that's required, but we'll worry about that in the future. Well, sustainability is definitely a problem if the cost of doing nothing. You will lose funding because you will not be equipped to apply for those grants. You will not be equipped to attract those new dollars. It also could create ineffective programs. You don't know if your programs are working and not working. And I have been in this place enough times to know that when you finally do implement outcomes and impact data, and if you do find out that there's something that isn't working because you've never really invested in looking at the effectiveness of your programs before, now that's going to take you even more time to course correct, which luckily funders love. And I want to share this with you. Funders they actually do love hearing from a nonprofit and saying, hey, we were looking at our data. We thought we would, be at an 85% success rate for our clients in workforce development. But what we realized is that we're only at a 63%. But our data shows us that, the reason that our clients aren't getting to those jobs is because their lack of access to affordable childcare. Right? I'm making up a complete real but fictitious story here. And when you can go to a funder with data-driven insights about, hey, we're not quite hitting the goals that we thought we would, but our data is telling us how we can be more effective, they love that. They love that. They don't worry about, oh no, we're not doing as good as we thought we were. No, the funders love to partner with data-driven organizations who they believe and trust that they have the insights to ensure that success comes, because they're looking at the data. So if you don't do anything, you won't know if your programs are effective, and you also could lead to employee attrition. And what we'll really see in the next 3 to 4 years is loss of relevance. Nonprofit funders, donors, individuals, this next generation of donors, they see the nonprofit community as the engine of impact. And if that is your mission, is to create impact in the community, and you are not demonstrating how you're creating that impact, you will lose relevance. The other organizations that have become data-driven will surpass yours. We've seen it in many organizations. And so why else do we need to prioritize for impact measurement now? Is because the good news is, according to Nonprofit Pro, executive teams are worried about these 5 things, and prioritizing impact measurement and having impact measurement will help solve these 5 things problems. And so we're really excited to show you how impact measurement will help you with these 5 problems: budgeting, remote workers, board influencers and expectations, diversity, equity, inclusion, and prioritization. And let's show you how you can leverage your impact measurement to solve for or stop worrying about these 5 things. Well, budgeting. So obviously nonprofits have a very fixed budget often, and nonprofit executives are all often worrying about, where will I get my resources? How will I keep the grants that we have? So we understand that it's a dynamic cycle, but when you have demonstrated outcomes and impact, that is how you increase your revenue. That's how you attract new donors. That's how you get increased gifts. That's how you get this trust-based operational support, is being able to prove and show your outcomes. These funds will then allow you to create more impact. And so this is the hidden sauce. When you have it, you now are helping open up the revenue. And so here's just an example of how having outcomes data at your fingertips could help you tell a better story to your funders, to be able to go in and, pull up your dashboard at the screen and know that we've got, hey, employment status, we're trying to move people to jobs. And currently 46% of our clients are currently employed. So we've got some work to do. We're seeing some trends here. You could show this type of dashboard to your funder and start to talk about, what's going on, what trends are you learning, how will their funds help you move this needle, help you drive success throughout your organization, and what it will take. The second problem that executive teams are worrying about is remote workers. And when we prioritize using technology specifically, and this is specifically the technology approach over manual approach, is it having things in the cloud and definitely like using Sure Impact, you now have a single place where workers can securely log in and all of the data is stored in a secure place where they have the right technology to work wherever they need to work. Do they need to work from home? Do they need to work from the field? They have everything they need in one place to do their job. So they can streamline their tasks and workflows. It makes it easier to have that accountability conversation. I know sometimes people are worried about remote work because how will you know if the employee is doing what they're supposed to be doing? But when you leverage technology, you'll be able to log in and see, what has this person done? What have they, how have they been interacting with their clients? What changes have they seen? Also making it easier for internal and external reporting. So information is there. You can start to have data-driven conversations with your team and with your staff. And it's very key to keeping remote workers cohesive and together and working towards the same goals. And here's just a screenshot of how Sure Impact helps organizations do that when they go into a client record, they'll be able to see all the activities that have happened for that particular individual, all the measures, how they've been moving the needle on key and important outcomes. And so if you're a supervisor of a remote worker, you could get on a Zoom call and start to discuss with each other the Sure Impact, what they're seeing in Sure Impact and what it's telling you and how you could perform better with that particular client, as well as then look at the aggregate data related to the performance across the department, and collaboratively, as a collaborative team, working wherever you want to work, have conversations about how you can improve. The third, how impact and outcomes measures will help executive teams, is board influences and expectations. So boards want access to powerful real-time insights into the program and organization performance, because board's job is strategic governance, and the board's job is to set the direction and ensure and be good stewards of those resources. And so when you are an executive director and you can go in to your dashboard during your board meeting, I mean, think about how many hours of your time as an executive leader's time is spent preparing information for the board retreat or the board report. And what if it was just, hey, I've got 5 minutes on our agenda here today. I'm going to log in to our organization's dashboard. I'm going to show you, hey, look, these were the number of hours. These are the number of clients we served. Here's how we're moving the needle. Here are some trends we're seeing related to our clients' success and our impact. You're empowering those board members to be able to tell a data-driven story to those out in the community that they work with, as well as then help you strategically problem solve for anything that is getting in your way for moving the needle. So if we looked at this fictional dashboard here, and we saw, hey, it looks like we're moving in the right direction with helping our clients pay their mortgage or rent, because we got a little green arrow and we're moving our needle there. But look, we're having a hard time with their credit history. Our clients are not increasing or improving their credit history. So what do we need to do? What services should we be providing to help bolster those scores? Or is there something we need to go advocate or lobby for or ask for funding for? And so having this type of insight at your fingertips totally changes the conversations that your organization can have. Fourth, executive teams are thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We all should be thinking about a diversity, equity, inclusion. We want to make sure that our data collection and infrastructure and reporting not only helps us tell our story related to our impact and outcomes, but allows us to analyze our data through an equity lens to make sure that we are creating equitable outcomes for all groups, looking at differences by race, by gender, by ethnicity, by geographical region, making sure that if we do find that one group of individuals or populations has different needs or different outcomes than others, we can tailor and pivot our programming accordingly. We also will be able to have those continuous improvement quality conversations. And here's a snapshot of how Share Impact will allow you to track your board, staff, and management teams' diversity and equity inclusion. So yes, you can collect data related to your equitable outcomes, but also what is your organization doing to move the needle on diversity, equity, inclusion within your organization over time. We have a whole funder collaborative in New Mexico that is simplifying the way that nonprofits are asked to share this information. They only have to put it in one place, which is in their Share Impact account, and share that particular information with the funders. So if they're looking to provide a grant, they don't have to ask for it 5 or 10 times. It's just right there for them. They can see the percentages of the DE&I for the different groups and help make decisions based on that. And the nonprofits can see that and have that when asked about it in their grants as well. So lastly, we hear that executive directors, executive teams are worrying about prioritization. What to do next? Well, impact measurement has those insights. That information is right there. You're able to see which programs are performing well. If there's anything that's not working the way it should be, any declines in program outcomes or activities, you'll have that information right there at your fingertips, which will let you create data-informed priorities in a way that you may never have had insight or visibility into before. And here's just another example of, a dashboard and how you can start to see trends over time by month. And if you start to see like the people's ability to pay their mortgage or rent starts to dip, well, what are we going to do about that? Or if one program has better outcomes than another, well, how do we, learn from the one program to another? Or maybe there's something about the needs of the different people in the two programs that we can dive into and have a conversation about. But we can't do that without real-time data and prioritizing and leveraging and automating how we track, measure, and communicate our impact. All right, so we're going to pause there for a minute because I know I get really excited when I talk about this stuff. But as we sit today, moving into 2024, access to real-time data is the only way for leaders to stop worrying about these 5 topics. It's about creating a new organization, a new norm, a new culture within the nonprofit sector so that we can focus on what really matters, and that is changing lives and changing circumstances. So let's review on how the manual approach to grant application and impact measurement is for most nonprofits. So first, you find an opportunity. Then your funder is going to ask for outcomes and measurable results. You have to then go to your staff and program team and ask for that data. And if the data, if there is data, the program team will spend hours pulling the data together. If there's no data, you'll explain what you will measure when you get the funding. And if you win, you'll scramble to figure out how to measure, and you'll continue to and then maybe you'll figure it out or do this process again in order to report it back to funders. Now, what does the Sure Impact approach look like? You find an opportunity, you log into your Sure Impact account, you review your outputs and outcomes in your analytics, you submit the grant, you win, you can continue to track what you've already been tracking. You can also give your funder a license to Sure Impact and share the data automatically, so they don't even have to ask you for reporting. They're just seeing your outcomes for the programs or the clients that they're funding, outcomes that they're funding. So you can see how this totally changes the way a nonprofit can operate and what would be available to the nonprofit in order to help them move their mission forward. So in order to help our nonprofits move towards a more automatic approach to impact measurement and having everything at their fingertips, what we've been learning over the last several years is in some cases, nonprofits haven't, maybe they have understood the importance of impact measurement, but didn't really realize the amount of money and opportunities they would be missing out on, or will likely be missing out on in the future. So that's why we've been doing these 4 webinar series, is to help nonprofits see what is possible and how to move towards an impact-centric organization. But the other thing that we've been learning is that a lot of nonprofits, they want to jump into the impact measurement space. They're committed to it. They want to have that data at their fingertips, but they just haven't had an opportunity to sit down and be thoughtful and develop their data-driven theory of change, their data-driven logic models, clarify what are those inputs and those outcomes that we want to be telling about telling our story. If we are going to automate our data collection and analysis and reporting, we need to be mindful and thoughtful about how we structure our measurement frameworks. And so we'll be offering a executive coaching engagement, walking executives through exactly how to create their measurement frameworks. And at the end of this 4-week session, you will have your outcome framework. So if you find yourself in that boat where you're unsure what you should be measuring, you think you should be measuring things differently, we'll walk you through exactly how to do that and how to set that up. They will all be virtual at the end of October and November. We'll be sending this out to you with the recording and the slides of this particular presentation, as well as we'll be sending out an option if you're thinking, you know what, I really do think that it's time for us to automate and have more of a Sure Impact approach. We'll be inviting you to schedule a demo to see how it could work in your organization. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share all of this. We do have some time, and I'd love to answer any questions that anyone has, whether in the chat or if you want to.
All right, well, thank you, Sherry, for that. So we've had some comments in the chat, and so one comment is from Marcy Rodriguez. She's talking about how easy to digest graphics are a must for executive directors. And I was wondering if you could share some examples of the type of graphics that, would resonate with an executive director.
Sure. I'm happy to flip back on my reason. Oh, wrong way. So 2 ways that Sure Impact provides easy to use kind of demographics when you log into the system is that our platform is sorry, while I scroll through here. You want just kind of the biggest takeaways at the forefront. So if you looked at this particular dashboard, at the forefront, you see, okay, we've had 41% of our clients have, right here, it tells us is employed. And we know how many were successful. We know the percentage of those clients are successful. You can drill down into, what's the rate by programs, trends over time. If you've multiple states, you could click into your state. So you can see how, just really right here at the beginning of having clear insights to what's going on. We also provide by measure instance. So this basically means the first time someone's assessed or they employed, the second. So can see how long does it take to get someone a job. And so if we looked at this particular graph, what we see is at the beginning, so as clients started to work with this organization, 159 out of 712 were employed. The second time they were measured, 228 were. So we're starting to see, obviously, the more we're working with our clients, the more success we're having, and just giving them really clear ways to start to have conversations, make decisions, and move the needle.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, can you give us some examples of how you would start the conversation about impact measurement with your executive director?
Yeah, so if you have an executive director and you know that you need these insights, because I hear from development directors all the time that they're like, I need impact data. I need outcome data if I'm going to do my job successfully. And I hate going to my program team because anytime I come down the hallway, they want me to go away because they know I'm going to be asking for something that's going to be hours of work for them. But if I could log in and have access to this myself and not have to bother anyone, I could do my job so much more effectively for the organization. And so how to begin the conversation is, start by saying, I went to some training on impact measurement. I learned how impact measurement is correlated with increased funding within an organization. And I'd like to share with you some ways that impact measurement could make our organization more successful, attract more money, be more impactful, and also simplify things for our team. I think that's really the best way to tee up the conversation. And then also some pointers that we don't have in the slide, but likely we'll be sharing soon, is we've been talking to funders about their appetite for funding impact measurement. And what they've been telling us is, hands down, all funders know that if they want impact data, they have to, organizations have to spend some money to get it. So they're prioritizing it, and they also would expect to see it in your program budget. Funders do not view impact measurement systems and efforts as overhead expense. They actually view it as program costs. And I was talking to one of the largest banks, global banks, foundations leader this week, and she was sharing with me how surprised she was that nonprofits were not putting it into their budget costs. And she was curious on how they were going to deliver the outcomes or demonstrate their outcomes when they were not even building their program budgets with the cost of effort, whether manual or technology, into that. And so there are a lot of ways to get this technology funded, but before you can even worry about how do you get it funded, you have to prioritize it. You have to make it a priority. You have to understand how it's going to move the needle in your organization forward.
All right, perfect. Next question. Will you contrast impact data from outcome and or quantitative data?
Well, yes. Will you contrast impact data from outcome? Yes. So I think we can probably go forward, like, what's an outcome, what's an output, what's quantitative, what's qualitative. So I think that what I think about it is outputs, which most nonprofits unfortunately confuse is outcomes. Outputs is what you do and the number of people you serve. So an output is just a count of what you do. An outcome is a result of what you do. So have you moved the needle on whatever your key, I don't know, like you all could have different missions, right? But is it maintain and increased employment? Is it maintained and increased affordable housing? Is it decrease in undesirable behaviors, increase in knowledge, education, right? So it's some sort of permanent status change or employment change for the organizations that you serve. And so that would be kind of an individual outcome. And in a lot of ways, I think of outcomes and impact as the same. We could take that outcome data and create a social return on investment, which gets to a little bit more of an impact statement. But I think if you're focused on outcomes, we can equate outcomes with impact in our current vernacular. Now, qualitative data has its place too. And, depending on how strict you want to be, sure, impact will track what a purist would call qualitative data, meaning it'll allow you to track movement on surveys or movement on Likert scales, which some would claim is quantitative or qualitative data. But then we think of it as more quantitative because you're measuring at time one systematically, at time two, like you're showing progress over time. And so that's kind of, I hope I'm answering that question for you. Happy to dive in more.
Okay, another question from Beth Carey. Is there a way to track impact based on non-direct services? We serve providers that serve low-income folks, so our data says how many providers we train, but not how many of their clients were successful because the provider took our training or services.
Yep, absolutely. So I think, and that's something our executive coaching program can help organizations think about as well. But part of it is educating your organization and your board and the community about what is your true impact. So if you serve providers, so if you are if you're a training organization or a quality organization and you are serving direct service providers are your beneficiary, right? So you want to measure what are their outcomes. What is their increased knowledge, their increased skill, their increased ability? And you can ask them, some qualitative questions related to how has this helped them better impact folks, low-income folks, or do their jobs better. But it's telling your story in a way that what do you do? Because obviously there's a problem or your nonprofit wouldn't exist. That these direct service providers that you train or you serve, they need your service just as much as those low income individuals need their services. So it's your job is not to get people out of poverty. Your job is to train the people so they can do their job and get people out of poverty. So a lot of it is about reframing the problem and how you solve that problem for providers, and talking about how you're moving the needle in their training, how you're equipping them to be more successful as well.
Another question, we've had success in the past with winning grants but why would we need to invest in something beyond the manual process now? So you kind of talked about that before, but maybe in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, I think there's probably a hidden cost that you don't realize. And that is that, really understanding how is that manual process? How are you getting that data? How is that data being aggregated? How is that data being collected? Do you have access to it when you need it, how you need it? Or is it, the evaluator will give it to us in a year? Or I talked to one nonprofit last week whose brother is a college student, and during the summer break every year, he volunteers to put together all their Google Forms and put a report together. So she has to wait nearly a year to get that information, but she has an opportunity where there are other communities across the country who are very interested in her work and wants her to scale and grow and move into other systems. But she knows she can't do that if how she does it is wait every summer for her, brother to happen to be off on break to help her do that. So I think it's really understanding what are those hidden costs to the manual process and asking yourself, is there a better way? is there a better use of our time if we were to leverage technology, so we could be not worrying so much about data cleaning and manual data, but getting to the point of how are we going to tell our story? How are we going to use this information to improve and to grow and to scale? That's how you want to use your data people. That's how you want to use your strategic people, is helping them drive and lead change initiatives, not, spending hours in data. And I did have a direct question, Laurel.
Okay.
I think it just went to me. So I was asked, Frank asked, how well does SureImpact integrate with other softwares, or what can it replace? And so SureImpact it can upload right now. It can upload data from any source. So sometimes people take data from their CRM, like they call it a CRM, but SureImpact is actually a client relation management system, not donor. So we're not a donor database, but we are a client and a case management system that thinks like an impact measurement process. So if you have a CRM that's helping you track services, activities, outcomes, SureImpact does that. It can replace that for organizations. But if for some reason we have other groups that are like, we spent years developing our CRM, it's custom built, we're not touching it, our staff would revolt, but we really need these insights at our fingertips, then they just upload their data into SureImpact. They still get all the benefits of the individual tracking as well as the aggregate and analytics, but they're just uploading their data into SureImpact. We also will likely have we will, not most likely, we will be rolling out an open API here in the very short future as well, to make that even easier.
Just one more question. So actually, Marcy Rodriguez made one other comment about, she said it's sometimes painful to put together our year-end data, but once it's done, it really makes you feel proud. We share it directly with our donors every year. And so just to go off of that, what is the benefit to an organization if you can share impact data with your donors in real time instead of just once a year?
Yeah, I think what's really exciting about having access to real-time data instead of kind of the painful putting together the annual report, one of the benefits is the trust level. I mean, we've seen it. We've been part of these conversations where a nonprofit will sit down with a new prospective donor and show them like, hey, I want to share with you our dashboard. I want to show with you how we're tracking our data and how we're moving the needle and how we're ensuring that we're, on course, off course. It's just a different level of conversation and excitement and trust a donor has about, like, if they're already bought into your mission and they know that you're so serious about it too, that you're not just thinking about this pretty annual report you're putting together, this impact report you're putting together, just a one-time activity, but this is just living and breathing in how you do work. It's a different level of engagement and a different level of trust that funder has from your organization. We know one organization that just got a $2 million grant. They didn't even ask for the grant. The funder came to them and said, I have $2 million. Because of the way you're tracking the data, because of the problems you're trying to solve, here's $2 million. Like, that's the difference. Instead of trying to convince someone to fund you, just building that trust and reputation that they just want to fund you.
All right, well, we are going to go ahead and wrap up. We are up against the hour. So thank you again for everyone for attending. And just a reminder, the second session in our 4-part webinar series will be on October 3rd at 1 p.m. In that session, you will be learning how to communicate specifically to your board of directors about how impact measurement impacts strategic focus, financial sustainability, and organizational stewardship and accountability. I'm going to be sending out a follow-up from this webinar that will have the slides, the recording, and also information about these upcoming webinars. And so if you thought of any specific questions that for your board that you would like Sherry to address in the next webinar, feel free to respond back to me. We would love any feedback that you have there. Also, if you have any questions specifically for Sherry, her contact information is on the screen and also will be in the slides. We appreciate all of you being here, and we hope to see you at future webinars.
Thank you all. Great questions. Good conversation. Bye.